Grace Williams, you are a health and nutritionist expert. It's been with an incredible story, a story of resilience, a story of giving, a story of having tremendous purpose. Purpose is a powerful word, and when I met you, it's clear you're so synced with having such a big purpose. And there's quite a unique story as to how you got there. Talk to us about how you relate to purpose.
Yeah, so thank you, firstly. It is such an honor to be here. Purpose for me was something I never knew what it meant. I was like, some people have a purpose, some people don't. But for me now, it's ultimately what's important to you. And finding my purpose meant going through a lot of pain, a lot of things that I would never have expected. I always say I was on that trajectory of life was happening, of I got good grades at school, went to uni, did exams there, did well there, I then decided to do law, was going to law school. It's like this whole sort of, the path was mapped out of just this, like, you study, you go into law, and then that's going to be your career, and that's going to be the next 30, 40 years. And then some curveballs were thrown at me, and it completely knocked me off that path, but actually for the best reasons, because it meant I found my purpose, which is what I get to do now. And it's, I think, purpose has become something that's now super important to me, because it means I'm in alignment with both energy and also having a sense of knowing where I'm going. I didn't really have a direction before. Someone else dictated the direction, and now it's being able to create my own direction with that.
The hurdles, resilience is something you've clearly has been A, challenging, but B, you've really taken out what you can and turn things into opportunities. Give us a flavor of the context to that.
Yeah, so I was trundling along. I was a lawyer. I was still a trainee at the time. I was at a US law firm, and it had been a super busy start to being a trainee. It was that classic thing of working until 3 a.m., never really seeing friends, rushing things at the weekend. But actually like really thriving off that, kind of loving that sense of this must mean I'm doing so well. And then out of nowhere, it was 2019, that summer, my mum was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and it completely knocked us all sideways. And within the space of weeks, we went from just regular life. It was actually July, so similar time to now. And it was that summer, like summer plans were building, and suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, all of that is out the window. And we were thrown into sort of the medical hospital world. Very quickly, she went for a biopsy, results were coming back, and it was then we had this treatment plan for the next 6 weeks of chemo, radiotherapy, all of these things, terms that you've heard of before, but I just didn't really understand. And then...
How old were you at this point?
I was 24 at the time. So really didn't understand anything, I will say. It then was like, okay, we've now got this. We've always been we were a close family. So it was very much, okay, what are we doing to deal with this as a family? But I felt quite responsible for looking after my mum from a caring perspective. But that was then really thrown to the fore so it was then December that year, my dad was diagnosed with lymphoma. And it was actually Christmas Day that we had to go through this whole malarkey of taking him to hospital at 9 p.m, which A&E on Christmas Day is like an episode of Benidorm mixed with EastEnders, mixed with Love Island. Like, it was just the craziest thing to watch at 2 a.m. when we were still there. But it was suddenly this thing of, oh my gosh, what is happening? Obviously with the context that then suddenly we get thrown into COVID, these like curveballs were basically life being thrown in so many different directions. And overnight my priority shifted from like work being total number one to just wanting to be there for my parents, but actually having a really hard time balancing that internally, because I was driven to be ambitious, to do well at work. And so the feeling of letting that drop, but also not wanting to let the family side of things drop, created this like whole sense of pressure and understanding, okay, what is it that's important to me and where do I stand within this, which kickstarted this purpose journey. That sort of caring experience was basically ended up being 3 years. So my mum, it was incredible. She was given 6 months. She lived with the brain tumor for 3 years. And we had a lot of ups and downs within that. As my dad recovered and got better, my mum got worse. So it was watching these two very different journeys. And then she ultimately passed away in summer 2022. So 3 years ago on Monday, which was that was another curveball, because the trajectory was supposed to be, I say supposed, what everyone says with the brain tumor is it's a very slow process. You'll know when the decline is. But my mum had been sick for such a long time that when she passed away, it genuinely was like the biggest shock in the world, even though we knew it was coming, because the way that it happened was just so fast. And so again, it was like this overnight, oh my gosh, she's not here, that we'd been told it was a real slow process and you'd have these like days leading up to it. So yeah, all of these curveballs definitely built a lot of resilience and meant I had to go on a real personal journey throughout and after that.
What's clear is how so much of your purpose at the moment is helping others. And you talked about what you cared about really changed, and things seemed to flip on the head, as it were. Talk to us about how it changed what you value in the world.
Do you know, I think it actually just showed me I didn't know what I valued, and I really had never put any thought into it. It was like I was on this treadmill and I'd never taken a second to stop and be like, is this what I want? I always use the example of, if someone asked me what I wanted to do, where did you want to go for dinner, what do you want to eat? It was like the worst question you could ask. I'd be like, I don't know, what do you want to do? Like, it just, I'd never really taken that time to take a step back and work out what it was I wanted. And also wasn't something I did in those years of caring. It was afterwards, when suddenly you realize that your health is fragile, life is fragile, that it became, I started to notice where my resentments were, and actually that was a real sign that I was potentially doing things that weren't in alignment with a purpose or something that I loved or was interested in. And so it started this whole sort of journey. And I think I see it quite a lot with my clients, of people start to get interested in this sort of health and well-being side of things. And within that becomes a lot of personal development work as well, because you start tuning out the noise. You tune out everything that's telling you what you should do, what's expected of you. And you actually start to get curious. And I think it did take me going through those years in order to do that, because I would have stayed on the trajectory of just like working for partnership, just keep on going, not questioning anything, and actually just accepting a lot of how I was feeling as normal, because I see that in clients now. It's like, these things are all normal, so we don't question them. But it does sometimes take taking a step back to really see what's coming up. And it's definitely what it did for me, to blow the gates open, of just be like, hi, there's a lot more to life, and where do you stand within that? And I am now so quick, especially around energy. I know if something actually, if I don't really want to do it, I will be like, God, I'm exhausted. It's not that I'm actually tired. It's that my energy just doesn't match with it. It's like, it's not for me. I know I don't want to do it. Whether it's a certain plan, a business idea, if my energy is not behind it, that's how I now know that actually maybe that's not something that's right for me. But that takes time to start getting in tune with that. We tune out of our bodies so much, and it's a real process to tune back in.
Those that have huge amounts of energy, passion, are able to give a lot, what are the themes that you can see in them? And how do you advise people to connect with themselves?
So I think the biggest thing is, again, coming back to that purpose, but they have a path. They know what their end goal is. And this can be on a big level of a business goal you want to achieve, or it can be on a very small level of, okay, this week I want to cook 3 meals at home. It can be on so many different scales. But when you have a very clear end goal, weekly, monthly, daily, yearly, when you have that, your energy is behind it, which means actually you're motivated to do it. It's when we leave things very unclear that I see people's energy dropped. You could say, oh, I really want to eat more healthily. But if you haven't got a clear map of what that looks like, you're not going to have the energy behind it. So those people that you really see are full of beans, and whether that is on the big career goal that they have or to bring in a new change, it's because they're so clear, A, on their why it's important to them, but also they have the path. And very often we forget the path side. We're like, I know what it is I want, but we just don't have the, okay, how am I going to get there? And the way that I will always work with people to tune back into that, the biggest thing I see is coming out of a stress response. And this is one of the building safety in your body is like an underlying theme throughout all of my work, because ultimately, and this was my own personal journey, when you are stuck in fight or flight, when stress is your default, you cannot think in that expansive, what's available to me, what opportunities can I take? You're in lack, scarcity, narrow-mindedness, and you actually cannot see past what's right in front of you. I knew for me, I ate the same meals on repeat, I wore the same outfits on repeat, because I just didn't have the capacity or the space to think outside of that. Particularly when I was a carer, that was like, I know, is it Steve Jobs who wore the same thing every day? There's a sense to it in the idea of, okay, you're taking out some decisions, but when you actually think holistically, okay, do I have the capacity to try something different? If that feels like too much, that's when stress is coming in and actually is really limiting you. And it definitely was for me. And when you start to release that and actually bring safety and calmness back into the body, that's when suddenly I see with clients, they're like, gosh, I really want to try, it can, as I said, it can be on a small level or a big level. I really want to try that new workout, or I've just put myself up for promotion. Those things come because they built that safety and they're able to see the opportunity elsewhere. Without that, you are like tunnel vision on what is in front of me. And that's all I have the capacity for. Build that safety and you completely expand your capacity. And that's how you start to tune in. Your body is always going to communicate with you. But if we're shutting off those signals, then that's when it's really difficult to tap into that.
Clearly one needs that foundation to be sorted to be able to even be in this sort of expansive mode. Are there some things that one can do to help facilitate those foundations being correct? And I want to touch at some point, maybe now, on compassion and self-compassion.
So I will always start with understanding where you currently are. So really get very honest with yourself of, are you stressed? Because you can ask yourself, am I stressed? No, I feel quite calm. But then think about, how are you sleeping? What's your digestion like? How's your hunger? How's your energy? If all of those things are off, if you're very reactive to things that are happening, I always say, okay, if the train gets cancelled this morning, how are you going to feel? If that's the most frustrating thing to happen, then it's a sign that actually your body is running more on its sort of survival response on resources, as opposed to being very calm and peaceful and going about your day. Because when you feel calm about that, you can literally go, oh, there'll be another one 10 minutes later. It's a bit annoying, but it's not going to derail your day. How we react to things externally is such a clear reflection of our internal state, how we're feeling. So the first stage is always getting super clear on, how is that coming up for you? Where are you on that stress spectrum? There are 3 stages to the stress response. Are you just in that initial fight or flight? Yeah, got in stress, but I can come back out of it quite easily. Has it become your norm? Is it so natural to you that you're like, this is how... I was someone that said, and it would repeat this so many times, I'd be like, I do so much better when I'm stressed. My work product is better when I'm stressed, when I'm under pressure. That's okay, as long as you're coming out of it. But so many of us are not coming out of it. And so seeing where it's coming up, and then the tools that you can bring in are things, one of the most powerful things you can do is bookend your day. How are you starting the day and how are you ending the day? So much of the middle part, whether that's work, you're building a business, you're spending time with friends and family, you don't have a lot of control over that part of the day, but you have a lot of control over how you start and how you finish it. So on a physiological level, are you getting natural light? That is what helps regulate the natural release of cortisol. You're supposed to get this big spike in the morning. We want that to turn off, and natural light is the signal to do that. It's also going to give you natural energy and not stress-induced energy. In the evening, are you still on your phone at 11 p.m. trying to go to sleep? Or do you have a space where actually you just take a second to be like, I'm now going to wind down. Like, this is my time for me. And when you create those spaces at the start and the end, it just gives your body a bit more resilience. And the more, that's where you start. And what you'll slowly start to realize is you can build in so many more practices. And where the self-compassion piece really actually massively comes in with that is when you're stressed, and even just when you're busy, not necessarily in that, oh gosh, I'm so stressed type feeling. But when you're busy, self-compassion goes out the window because your priorities are all external. For me, self-compassion is coming back to what permissions are you giving yourself? What grace are you giving yourself to? Is it that you need to rest? Is it that you need just 10 minutes without someone emailing you? So you just need to leave your phone for 10 minutes and actually just have that space. The self-compassion piece is understanding that you are your own priority. You are actually the only one that is going to prioritize yourself. And when you bring that in, say you slip up and you have a day where literally just like you are on high alert, go, you don't stop. You also don't berate yourself for that because you know how to come back from it. And I think it's a lot of, whether it's social media, podcasts, there are so many things that we should be doing. But it then takes away, the connection to what does work for me, but it also makes us feel like we're always failing because we're never fitting enough in. So our self-compassion goes completely out the window because we're like, oh gosh, I didn't manage to do that 10-step morning routine that I've read about or listened to in that podcast. But actually, can you strip things back? And what's one thing that you need for you today? If you only achieve that, you've still stuck to a promise. You can give yourself the compassion, give yourself the grace to know that another day might be better, and you slowly build and build.
You talked about how people have a funny relationship, and guilt's a big theme here, around people taking time out in their day to do something, and how the concept of us working from 9 to 5 and being equally productive over that time is just nonsense, and how we're really, as a species, we're really still figuring a lot out. And some businesses, I think it's DeepMind, the founder of DeepMind, he's very efficient at working at night, for example, and is super aware that other people are efficient at working in the morning, and how, hold on, why don't they encourage people to be able to work when they can be efficient? Talk to us about people managing that relationship with guilt, and what you do is super entrepreneurial, and whether or not one's doing their own thing or working in a business. There's always, the to-do list always seems endless. I'd be interested to hear your view on how people can have a healthy sense in that, and maybe there's a view on shortcuts. Look, we're always talking about shortcuts, but protecting energy, but yet being efficient.
It really, I think actually it's so powerful to know when you do work best, because within the structure of what you work in, whether it is you're building your own thing or you work within a company, knowing the hours that you are going to be most focused is really important, because ultimately that's the time that you want to maximize. Where the sort of, I think two things come in. When you are on someone else's schedule, so say it's that you are contracted to work from 9 until 5, we'll use that. You have those boundaries, but within that, ultimately your work product, how much you have to deliver within those hours, that's what you are in control of. And so you get to do that in the time that it works for you. If you are super productive when you first get into the office, you know that actually that's the time for you to maybe put your headphones in, not engage with all the chat around the coffee machine, and actually really focus on your work, because come 4 p.m, your focus isn't going to be as strong. So that's when naturally you want to start taking some breaks, and that's when you bring in the coffee meeting or the BD research that actually doesn't mean very much. Like tailoring your tasks, I always talk about task syncing. Every task has a different energy and stress behind it. It might be that you have a full day of something that actually is super high stress. That's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of focus, but you know that's what you have to face that day. The most important thing is, like, when you dedicate a task as that important, the stress and how you approach that is only on that task. When you then check your emails or go for a walk, you're then not walking at 100 miles an hour and like it's an Olympic sport. We then have to actually think, hold on a second, I can do this calmly, but I can focus on my work with a lot of Stress is not a bad thing. Stress is actually something we really want to use to our advantage. And when we can is when it's something that requires drive, motivation, focus, getting something done efficiently. That's when stress, we want to tip into fight or flight, use that to our advantage, but then very quickly come out of it once that task is done. The problem is we don't come out of it. We go in, but we don't come out. And so if you find that energy is dipping at certain points of the day, two things I would always say: get outside. Firstly, if you find your energy dipping, really go see some natural light, get some fresh air. It will give you such a boost. But then also think about, how are you fueling yourself? Because I've spoken a lot about output, so the doing, but a lot of my work is all around making sure you have the internal foundations to maximize and optimize that output. And that comes down to both your recovery, but also your fuel. How are you eating? What foods are you eating? And if you find that actually your focus always drops at 4 p.m., maybe your lunches aren't working for you. Maybe actually you're not eating enough in the morning, that's then having this real energy crash in the afternoon. And so it's a very holistic picture at looking at, hold on, where there is a natural level that some of us work better later in the day and some of us work better earlier in the day. We all have different timings around that. But the way that we fuel ourselves will also dictate that as well. People that are super focused, have a lot of like energy first thing in the morning, fuel themselves. They fuel themselves so that their blood sugar is balanced, they're not having a crash, and they're able to sustain that energy because they keep it going through the day. So there's a real input sort of angle to this as well, of thinking, okay, the job part I can't control. What's in my control is A, knowing when I work best, but B, how am I fueling this work? How am I making sure it's sustained? Am I running off coffee and then trying to make it until lunchtime? That's not going to be conducive to actually staying focused just between 9 to 5. If you have more flexibility and actually you can have a very slow morning, work later in the evening, if you dictate your hours, like I dictate my hours now, and I know that actually I don't work very well between 6, 5 and 7. Those are my hours where I'm like, those are for me. I then pick up work afterwards. I'm also not a morning person, so I don't force myself to start at 8 a.m. It's all, if you have some control, that's when you can bring it in. But knowing how you're supporting yourself through that, I think is very important. I think that was the second part of your question. I've just completely forgotten it.
Don't test me on the second part. So yeah, there's a lot there. So one theme I think is quite intriguing is the compound impact that small differences can make. Are there some things you work with some of your clients that illustrate the power of that? Maybe it's getting up earlier or later. How small changes can lead to big things that are unrelated to that specific area.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that in order to feel better, you have to overhaul your life, that you have to make these drastic life changes. But actually, think about those bookends. How are you starting the day and how are you ending the day? That is so key when it comes to your energy, but also that feeling of having space for yourself. We often think, okay, if I've given 2 hours to work, I need the same amount of time for myself. You actually just sometimes need 2 minutes, 5 minutes to just check in, reset, go do something different, and then you'll feel better. From a nutrition perspective, I will always say it's around, are you fueling yourself enough? So eating consistently, and are you balancing your blood sugar? When it comes to focus, energy, particularly in high performing environments, blood sugar is such a cause of extra stress, and we want to minimize any extra sources of stress that actually are within our control. So it is making sure that you are eating enough protein, getting some fiber in there, and having healthy fats in each of your plates. When you have a meal formula that works for you, that compounds, because not only does it make you feel better energetically, your digestion is better, your focus is better, but mentally as well, you take that load off you. That so often the decision fatigue around food is so strong, particularly when you are busy and you're just like, I don't even know what I want to eat. When you have a go-to formula, that very small change of like understanding, okay, this is what works for me, takes that decision fatigue out, and that builds and builds with time and understanding your body. I think another one similar to the bookends would be to actually create space in your day. It can be 5 minutes, but when you are working, say you finish a task, can that be your signal that you go, say you've been sat at your laptop, can you get up and go look out of a window for 5 minutes? Can you actually go read a book, do something very different to what you were doing? A lot of people think about circadian rhythm. So that's our body's internal clock. It runs every 24 hours. But we also have these smaller cycles called ultradian rhythms. And there's a powerful research around we're only supposed to focus for around, on average, it's 90 minutes. That is when the brain can be very efficient, focusing really well, performing optimally. But at the end of those 90 minutes, if we think about all of the processes your brain is having to go through, there's a lot of waste that builds up. And ultimately, if we push through and we just try and work for long stints of time without breaks, the brain is not refreshing, it's not restarting. And so actually over time, your productivity, your focus, the work product dwindles because we're not giving our brain that space to actually reset, process everything it's gone through and come back stronger. And that's the same, so that's on the brain level, but the body too. Those 5-10 minutes that you take to take a break, over time, it's just that reset of like, I can now come back stronger because I've given myself the space. But we have this mentality of push through. It doesn't make you more productive. And I think one of the best things Law taught me is that because we had to time record everything, you know how long a task is supposed to take, but how long it has actually taken you. And when you see that on a clock, that a piece of research took 6 hours and probably could have only taken 3, you have this real realization of, God, I've not been productive here. And that was not from not wanting to do the work. It's just, I actually tried to push through and I couldn't keep that focus there. So it's those small things of thinking about your nutrition, thinking about the spaces in the day. And I think natural light is one that I will always come back to because for energy, your mood, it just makes the biggest difference in the world. If you can build those into your day, it really changes it.
And what we don't have an idea on is what's going through other people's brains. I think that there's quite a lot of research around how much energy the brain uses. Do you look into this with clients and what they're thinking about? Because it's so clear when people are stressed and anxious that their energy just goes. Do you have mechanisms that you suggest to people to have more control over their thinking? It's so interesting that you're talking about giving your brain breaks and meditation, for example, how that impacts people. There's a lot of research in how impactful that can be.
Definitely. And a lot of our worries, a lot of our fears are just thoughts. They're not reality. They come from the millions of thoughts we're having in our head every single day. And a way that I'm a big fan of journaling, and not a sit down for half an hour and write everything that you're feeling, but actually if you feel a bit of angst coming up or you're not quite sure about something, get a pen and paper out, or if like just the notes on your phone, and ask yourself, how am I feeling? You can use a number scale, like rate yourself 0 to 10. How am I feeling? What is my energy? And then ask why. And the first time clients try this, nothing will come up, particularly if you are very used to just being that push through, go, go mentality. But the more you ask yourself, how am I feeling? Why? The more is going to come up. And that is how you then start bringing awareness. Self-awareness and understanding your patterns behind things is really powerful. And you said earlier around guilt. I think guilt is something that we put it on ourselves. Guilt doesn't come from someone else. Guilt comes from, I feel guilty because I took time for myself, for example. Something I had when I was caring, I never really left the house because I felt too guilty to have the 2 hours with some friends because I was like, no, I need to be at home to make sure my mum is okay. Probably the best thing I could have done was taken those 2 hours, because all that ended up happening, full disclosure, was my mum and I was exhausted and very on edge. She might have said something, I've probably snapped, and then she's burst into tears. Probably would have been better if I'd gone out for those 2 hours. And the guilt we put on ourselves is it's something that comes up a lot in people's thoughts that actually drains a lot of the energy side of things. But if you can get them out onto paper, that physical act is, I always say, it's like taking it out of your brain, because then your brain doesn't need to remember it. Put it down on paper and you start understanding, you can piece things together more clearly and understand where these thoughts are coming from. And I think when it comes to being busy and understanding what is coming up for you, what's blocking you, very often it's things like perfectionism, feeling like you don't have enough time, feeling like you're not allowed to do something, the guilt. these things play on your mind and they build and they get bigger than they actually are. If you say it out loud, once you've written it down and you read it out loud to yourself, you'll realize how small that thing is and that actually there's so much you can do to combat it. But it takes getting it out first. And that could be, I say to some clients who are like, I just don't really like journaling. I'm like, record a voice note on your phone. Everyone has the voice memo app on their phone. Record a voice note. It doesn't go anywhere, but you get it out and you actually get to say it out loud, which is really powerful.
There was an exercise which is write out 50 things you want. And the big things it doesn't seem to be very effective on. It's more the really subtle small things. So it could be, I want to make my walk this morning slightly nicer, or I want to make this person feel special, or I want to maybe add something to a room. There's something around that's quite powerful. Do you have any views on that? Do you relate to that? And I guess there's a few things there, really, one putting agency on themselves, but really awareness and linking to what you were talking about.
Definitely. And those promises you make to yourself, when you stick to it, that's how you build confidence. One of the biggest wins, so to speak, that is not spoken about when you start this work is the confidence that you build. You come to work on your stress, to improve your gut health, to find a balance, to feel like you can balance work and life, whatever it is, that's your goal. But the biggest result I see is how confident my clients feel after the time working together, because they suddenly are prioritizing themselves. That's why lists like that I love, because ultimately you put it down on paper, and when you follow through on it, you start to build this actual belief and understanding that actually you can put yourself first and you are important. And the confidence that then comes from that trickles into everything. It trickles into how you walk into a room, the opportunities you put yourself up for, how you speak about yourself, all things that actually, if we think about career success, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in corporate, those traits are so important and very often are the things that we envy or lust after in other people. We're like, God, how are they so confident? Confidence is not, you're not born with it, or not, like you either, it's not that you don't have it or have it. It's a skill that you build over time. It's a trait. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is to stick to the little promises. And I think lists like that and really getting clear on, as I said at the start, having your direction, knowing what it is you want, and then having a path to get there. And that can mean breaking some things down into smaller pieces. And when you then stick to those, so you said around making someone feel special, when you stick to that, not only does it make that person feel good, you feel great, and then you want to do it again. You want to do something else. And it's that compound, as you said, it builds and builds. And I think confidence is something that, again, when we're in that constant high alert state, confidence is the first thing to go out the window because it's not important. I did a workshop recently with a brand all around confidence because they were coming at it from, okay, how do we build confidence through clothes? And I was coming at it from, okay, we have the clothes and that's giving you that real boost. How do we also make it something natural? You can't naturally feel feelings like confidence and walking into a room and knowing what you want if you're stressed. Ultimately, your body's not going to give you that emotion. And I think those lists are a really beautiful way to start that journey because it means you get to see, oh, what is it that I do want? Get curious. And I always say there's a stage between a habit and like nothing. So there's this experimentation stage. Very often we're like, this is going to be my new habit and I'm going to stick to it for 3 months. But we miss the fun of experimenting with things, and that comes before the habit. Like, experiment with different things and then find the thing you want to make a habit. Some experiments are going to go wrong. You're not going to enjoy them. It's not going to be for you, or you do it, it makes you more stressed. There's going to be things that don't work for you that might work for other people. Some people find breath work so unsettling and it's not right for them. Other people find it very difficult to meditate, but they can sit and journal. When you experiment with all these different things, same with foods, some people do really well off a more high carb diet. Actually, that really suits their blood sugar. Other people, it completely tanks them. And so experimenting, getting curious about these things is, very fascinating. And I think that's how you start to learn your body, make those small promises that you commit to, you build confidence, and that trickles into so many different areas of how you're feeling.
You're touching on how different things work for different people. I love the anecdote and how you talk about clothing and how that can bring confidence to people. Can you think of some things that give you confidence that maybe were surprising or give other people confidence?
I think for me, I hated public speaking. When I was in law, if someone asked me to give a presentation, even to speak up in a meeting, I would be so anxious about it for days. And then starting this business, a lot of what I do is corporate workshops, I speak at events, and even speaking on podcasts, it's my favorite thing to do is now speaking, whether it's in front of people, one-to-one. Like, I have found a confidence in that I never thought was there. And that came from building that safety. I could not see that actually I was able to do it because I was just so one-track mind, focus on literally what's in front of me and freak out about anything new. Speaking in a meeting is not something you do every day, or giving a presentation. So that was just like too much for my nervous system. And so for me, I think that's where I saw it very personally. I've had one client who recently, she's had a lot of health struggles, and you really lose your confidence in that. It knocks you feel like your body is always against you. And through a lot of nervous system regulation, we've really rebuilt her diet. She's able to include so many more foods. And linking it to clothes, she sent me a picture the other day she always wears black because she was like, I don't want to be seen. Black's my like comfort blanket. And she sent me a picture of a dress that she bought that is floral, beautiful, like the most beautiful summer dress. And she was like, I'm not ready to wear this yet, but I've bought it for when I am. 3 months ago, she would never have had the sort of even thought process or the capacity to be able to think about buying that dress. That wouldn't have been in her sort of realm of, okay, what is possible? The fact that she bought that is like the biggest statement of, I'm going to get there, as a belief in yourself. And that comes from building trust in yourself, building that safety, putting yourself first, and actually realizing that agency piece is really important. And when you start to take control and not let, I think through my mum and losing her, you start to realize that there are so many things that can come against you and that can literally take. My mum was so vibrant. She had such a warm energy. And within the space of months, she couldn't do anything for herself. Her life was stripped down to sitting in a chair, watching TV all day. And that was all she could do, or talking to one of us. There was no going out. There was no sort of just jumping in the car. She used to drive everywhere, drive miles and miles, see my brothers at school. And that was all taken away. And when you see that, you're like, okay, I want to now take control of my life as much as possible and really use that to my advantage.
There's a lot to life. If someone asks you, you've got 50 years left, how would you explain what you want from that time? And part of that can be fine, like the fun holidays, etc. But how do you, in your view, optimize it's your morning walk to work, for example. It's your like getting on the tube. Do you think that we should be focusing on those moments more?
For me, it's how do you feel while you do those things? So the true wellness to me is being able to do those lovely things, whether it's going on a walk in the park, taking your dog out, going on holiday, jumping on a plane, or sitting at your desk and doing a job, but still feel peaceful, calm, in control, and not like your day is controlling you. And for me, when you find that level of peace and calm and serenity around what you're doing, knowing that you're not going to love everything, you're not going to be happy every single moment of the day, but if your baseline feeling is joy and peace, that for me is everything. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And if you can feel as happy jumping on a plane and going on an incredible trip as you can wake up in the morning and seeing a sunrise, or even waking up and it just being a sunny day. It's currently thunderstorms outside. When you can wake up and you see the sun and that makes you as happy, that for me is like true well-being and true wellness, in the sense of we can all strive for the external. And I always also use the example of clothes here. I love buying nice things. Like, material items are something that I will always take a lot of joy from. I probably get that from my mum, who was a handbag addict, and that's definitely been passed down. And so I'm never one to say that the external things, whether it's something you buy, an experience, whatever, it's not important. They fully are. But that shouldn't be the thing that you chase to give you the happiness. The happiness comes from yourself and the peace comes first. And yeah, just feeling at peace in your choices and content is my ultimate vision for anyone that I work with, for anyone I speak to, for myself. And it really is, it's not changing the output, it's not changing what you do, but changing how you feel while doing it. Because we can all do it stressed, exhausted. But actually,
and a lot of different moments. You touched on the big goals that people have, and then also the small stuff and changing their appreciation for and their ability to execute. So, you know, your lives force you to learn a lot and figure a lot out, and you really throw your time, care to other people in trying to help them on their journey. That's no doubt massively changed, and your perception of what you want from a life partner and who you want, what you want from those that you're surrounded by. Talk to us about that, and perhaps a form I'm thinking about is like undervalued currencies, or things that we don't necessarily, people aren't necessarily straight to talk about, but that are clear to you that they're very much something that should be talked more about.
Yeah, I think, you know, as someone that is like dating and it's such a whirlwind of a world, ultimately, whether it's friendships, romantic relationships, business relationships, asking yourself and being very honest about how does that person make you feel. If you feel slightly on edge around someone, or you're worrying about what they're doing, or you're not quite sure about a decision they might make, if you can't fully trust them, then they're not your person. That's not to say they're a bad person, but everyone has different energies, and energies match or they don't match. And I'm a big believer that we're not all for everyone. And actually, when you can get really honest about that, of I felt a bit off around that person, and it can be in business, it can be in friends, it can be in so many different sort of realms of life. That is one of the biggest things. And knowing that someone will be there for you in the good and the bad, again, works in any situation. But something that the friends that were there for me during those 3 years, that were there for me after my mum passing away, they are my ride and dies, because I know that in the darkest times, they stood by me for 3 years. They didn't expect me to be happy, jolly, to make them laugh. And the same comes when you're thinking about life partner, when you're thinking about relationships. Things are not always going to be sunshine and roses. There are going to be times that are tough, and having that trust and full conviction that actually that person will be there for you and can hold you, especially if you are someone that holds a lot for other people, there will be a time when you need it to be the other way around. And I think that's a quality that I look for across the board. Same in business as well. There are things that if they don't feel like a full yes, that I'm not going to go for them, because energetically there'll be something off there. And again, like we've spoken about a lot today, I think that really takes being honest with yourself and actually stopping the autopilot. Get off the hamster wheel, get off the auto, oh yeah, he looks great on paper, and actually take a step back and be like, but how did that make me feel? Did I feel safe? Did I feel like I could be myself? Did I try and hide part of me? Did I actually not admit something? The story I always tell is I ended up going on a date and telling someone that I had an infrared sauna in my flat that looks like a tent that your head sticks out the top of. I didn't care, because it was like, do you know what? That's just me. It's batshit crazy, but that is like a part of me. But we so often hide those things to fit in the perfect mold. If you can be yourself around someone, then that means a lot. Again, no matter the situation or setting that you're in.
I love that. Different cultures have different propensities for people to talk about certain things. What cultures or attitudes are you like, whoa, we need way more of that? Or things that you generally want people to behave in a certain way?
Ooh. I just wish we were more open. I wish it was the norm to say that you're not okay. It was actually people took the time for themselves that they needed. If you don't want to go to a plan, that's saying no actually isn't a bad thing. If you don't have capacity to take on extra work, that you say that, and actually someone might then go, do you know what, Grace, you do have the capacity, and you have a reality check, or someone understands it. And I think there's we are very closed. We're very back to that perfectionism side, we never want to show weakness. And I will say this is like still a huge work in progress for myself, because I find it very hard to admit that maybe something is too much, or I don't have time for something, or to admit a flaw. But I think the more we can do that, the more human you bring into a relationship, a conversation. And that's what's so often missing, that real like human connection. There's an incredible study around loneliness that ultimately it is more detrimental to your health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And that epidemic is only getting worse and worse as we get more addicted to things like social media and speaking to people through screens rather than seeing them in real life. The more we can bring that human connection, whether that is you actually get more, you release more oxytocin when you speak to someone on a phone or through a voice note than you do through a message. So there's different scales to this. Obviously, the best thing is to see someone in person, but if that's not possible, can you send a voice note? Can you call them? And be open about how you're feeling, because the more that I always say restriction is not just about, oh, I restrict a certain food, I don't eat dairy. Restriction is a physical feeling. If you think about restriction in the body, your whole body tenses, which means you're feeling stressed. Your body is not free and just like letting things, like the thoughts aren't going to flow. Everything is tense. And when we stay in that tense feeling, you're not going to share, you're not going to be open, you're not going to be yourself.
A lot of amazing views there. Sometimes one can't connect with certain people for various reasons. Maybe one is working in a really remote place. How do you advise people to have that connection? And perhaps you really look up to some societies that function, or maybe it's groups of people that meet in a certain way.
Do you know, I think being in London, like, we are so lucky with how many things we have available to us to build connections, whether that's through communities, there's so many things now of like walking communities, running clubs, just going to the gym, going for coffee and actually having a conversation with the person next to you. But I think people can do that and actually still feel very lonely, because if you are not connecting with people that are really on your level, that you actually feel like are your people, it's not the same level of connection. It can give you a little bit of a boost. There's nothing better than smiling at someone on the street and them smiling back, and you're like, oh, that was actually really lovely, or saying thank you to someone that holds the door open for you. But then the next level of connection is actually, do you have people around you that lift you up? And when you have that, it will really change your energy, and it will really change how you feel going into the week. I always say, with a lot of clients who are very type A driven, they are working so hard, they've nailed their habits, they've nailed their routines. The biggest prescription I will give them is go for dinner with your friends on Friday night or Saturday or whatever it is. Go for brunch on Saturday, go for Sunday lunch. Plan one meal in that week that's just going to mean you let go and you laugh, because that's the connection we need. And if you can't do that, if you are somewhere remote, how can you recreate it? We had the years of COVID where we were not seeing people, but somehow there was a lot of loneliness, but we also found ways to connect with people. And that could be through calling your best friend, having a FaceTime where you're both eating dinner if you're in different countries. It could be sending her a voice note because you've just suddenly thought of her and something's made you laugh. I have no doubt that when she listens to that, she will laugh and then she will feel great too. But it's getting creative of ways of actually what makes me feel good if I receive it, and how can I give that to other people and know that you're going to get that back as well. And if you don't necessarily have those people, find places that you can go to, things that you love, and actually just pluck up a conversation with someone. One of my closest friends now is someone that I met. We went on a walk in January that was like set up by the girl that I do Pilates with. Didn't know anyone. It was a rainy January morning. She is now one of my closest friends because we were just so similar and like on the same level with so many different things, and she's become a very close friend. And that was a connection that I would never have expected to have made. But so often we're like, oh, I'm past 21, I'm not going to make new friends. Actually, you can make incredible friends any single day of the week and bring in that connection whenever you want. And to take it even deeper, if you really feel lonely, how disconnected do you feel from yourself? If you cannot just sit at home and actually feel very content with being by yourself, being able to say it is you want to write that list of the 50 things you want to do, or you want to watch something silly on TV, If you can't find true like peace and joy in that, question how go you are, because definition of being in your parasympathetic is actually being able to just sit and do nothing. So yourself can also be being content in yourself is also important.
Okay, a bit of homework for people if they want it. You touched on how we feel, which makes me think about how people can use lists to write out things they want to feel. What are the buckets of in which you would give people for things that they want generally? And the first one we've got is feeling. So people could write down 20 feelings they want to feel.
I would always say, because we have a really bad range of vocabulary for feelings. We think happy, sad, angry, upset. Like we have very small, or like a very small list of words that we connect to when it comes to emotions. But there are so many more emotions in vocabulary that we could be using. So I will always say, get up a list of emotions. Just Google it. Emotions that you can feel. And pick out 5 that really resonate with you. And rather than having a list of like loads and loads, just pick out 5 that you're like, if I could feel one of those every day, ideally all 5, but if I could feel those every day, I would be happy. And then within that, so you then want to think about the buckets. It's all quite personal, but like for me, my words will always be joy, abundance, love, and peace. Those are like the 4 that I will always come back to, and probably health I would throw in there as well. And within those, it's okay, in relationships, in my work, in family, in finances, in living. So I put sort of travel experiences, things that I want to go through life and sort of experience in that way. In those buckets, how do you bring those emotions in? So have the emotions at the top, and then think about the different areas of your life, but the ones that are important for you, because where you live might not be something that is important for you. Your career might not be something that actually you really want to focus on. So this might change with the seasons, it changes with the time, but then bring in goals, bring in like, how can I bring in that joy to my work? How can I make something a little bit different to find that joy again? Actually, I'm really interested in X topic. How can I put myself up to be on that team to work with them? And it's not something that you're going to get necessarily in the next week or month. It might be years in the making, but you have that goal and that vision there, and that's very powerful. That's why I included health in there, because I think when we think about those feelings, we often we always forget them. We go on the material side and we forget actually the health side of things. Like, what is it that's going to serve us to get there? That's when it's okay, I know that I want to bring in more movement to my day in order to have the strength to chase my children around the garden, which I know makes me really happy. There's so many different ways it all links, but have the buckets, just get a sheet of paper. Nothing will come the first time you do it, or maybe only a few things will. But the more you think about it, you'll end up writing pages and pages as you go through.
If energy is partly a product of purpose, and purpose can be hard to find, and it seems that you just having a sense of self-worth is such a main pillar to even get near purpose, is there a tool or like a quick exercise you get people to do to create a sense of self-value? It seems like it's a currency that's not really focused on for people in general.
Yeah, do you know, for me, it comes back to that confidence piece of what promises are you letting slide and what are you sticking to? Because the more you let things slide, the more you lose your value, because you ultimately are telling yourself that you don't stick to the things that you told yourself you would do. And that's it knocks you very far. There's something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that ultimately you have self-actualization at the top, and that's like you're reaching your ultimate potential. But in order to get there, you have to go through it's a pyramid, you have to go through the other stages. And right at the bottom is your physical foundations. It's how are you fueling yourself? It's the safety in that angle. Then come things like confidence. Those start building, and that's how you get to that sort of key point of self-actualization. But we have to build those foundations first, and a lot of that comes down to what promises are you making and what are you not sticking to. When you start building those, where are your internal foundations? Where actually do you know you are letting yourself slide in the pursuit of finishing something on time? Versus, okay, that's okay to do, but how do you correct it in other areas? Because if you're always putting yourself last, that value is not going to be there. And so actually, a lot of when a client when we've created a plan together and then they come back next week and be like, yeah, I found that really hard to stick to. When we delve into it, it's because they ultimately didn't feel it was a priority. They were like, I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't make it make it that important. So why didn't you? And if we think about it, so often it's because actually maybe it's not the right goal. And that's how you can start to see with that last exercise. If something's not sticking, it might just not be for you. And it might be that actually your energy is being directed elsewhere, and we start getting, it's a whole process. Value, self-value. There's no one quick fix to suddenly find it. Stick to the little promises. Anything's not sticking, maybe that's not for you. Try something new, bring in that experiment. But it's difficult to snap your fingers and be like, you're now going to have the value, but you have to decide you want it. That's also another thing. Very often we tell ourselves, oh, I really want that promotion. But actually, if you don't have a full body yes, you're going to find lots of different ways to self-sabotage. If you don't really want to go on a run, your brain will find a million ways to stop you from going on a run. If you don't want to eat that green soup that you made, you'll also find a million reasons not to do it. So you have to decide what you want and then stick to it. That's how you build the confidence. Self-value comes through that as well. But then underlying that, having those internal foundations there.
And you've got a course called The Foundations, haven't you? And then another one. Talk to us about those courses and what they offer people.
Yeah, so The Foundations is a guide that basically just delving into the key things that you really want to focus on when it comes to your health. Very simple practices. There's a 10-day challenge of little things that you can do each day to help support your digestion and your energy. So I think one of the challenges is literally as small as adding a pinch of salt to your water in the morning, because very few of us are hydrating properly. And if we're dehydrated, it's very hard to focus, your energy drops. So that is a very good starting point. If you're like, I have no idea where to go with these internal foundations, I always say start there. And then my other program is the Rhythm Code. And this is where we're taking those foundations and delving into a whole lot more, which is all around understanding the natural rhythms that our body is built to thrive on and to operate on. So we've become so disconnected from actually where true energy comes from, how metabolism works, what safety means in the body. And we're just pushing through, and we keep on adding different habits without understanding whether they are working for us. So it's an 8-week program where we delve into all of those different topics: metabolism, bloating, blood sugar, thyroid. We're going into all of it, and with a personalized element of what as well through the coaching side. So it's a real deep dive into all of that just to understand. I always say, we always try to do without knowing why, but we actually sometimes the why and the learning needs to come first, because then the habits naturally follow, as opposed to trying to force something that you're like, why am I doing this? What is the point? It's only going to be important if you understand why you want to do it and you have intention behind it. Intentions are so key. So yeah, that's the Rhythm Code. I also have a training on confidence that is a lot about what we spoke about, building safety and building those foundations for confidence as well.
And you worked with a big brand. Can we say which brand that is? Or
Yeah. So the confidence training was with Dior, which was actually a very full circle moment. So I'd bought a Dior jacket to wear to my mum's funeral, and that jacket is what got me into my mum's funeral that day. Like, it was putting that on, it was like, I can now face what is in front of me, which meant walking into a church full of people that loved my mum, and somehow we had to walk in behind a coffin, and I knew that was going to be impossible, but the jacket gave me this, I've got this feeling. And so to then work with them to bring this training to really, we created it together from a sense of like, where do women get confidence from? How does it change how we feel? And what are the things we can do to really build that? It was a really sort of full circle, very beautiful moment. So more to come this year together as well, which will be very exciting.
We were talking earlier about currencies that we need to focus on. Confidence, what a beautiful one that people can get from you. So we're now going to jump into the quick fire questions. 3 things you get joy from.
Waking up to a sunny day, Nancy, my dog, throwing a toy around her head, and seeing a pink sky.
A mantra you want to embrace now would be?
Let go. I'm always wanting to hold on to control, fear, But when you let go and trust the process, that's really what I'm trying to lean into more of.
One unusual thing that gives you pleasure?
Terrible TV, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It shouldn't make me as happy as it does.
A favourite film, book or artist that isn't obvious?
A favourite book recently, I mentioned it to you, is Finding Your North Star by Martha Beck. I think it's a really beautifully written book that is one I think I will come back to at different stages of my life and probably take something different from it every single time.
Best advice you've ever received?
A friend, when my mum was diagnosed, my friend, she is a practicing Muslim, and she told me there is, in the Quran, it says that God will only throw you the challenges that he knows you can face. And whether you're religious, not religious, spiritual, whatever you lean towards, it is something I came back to time and time again and took so much comfort from, knowing that ultimately every challenge, what I was being dealt with, I was going to be able to handle, and there was going to be something that came, a lesson that came from it. And it meant I didn't hide away from that and feel like the world was against me. And I think it's something that has really stuck with me ever since. So anytime something comes up, I have this deep trust of something. I know I'm supposed to go through this and I know I can handle it, which, yeah, meant a lot in that time, and it still does now.
Something you want to learn more about?
Probably AI, because having been a lawyer, we were not allowed to touch anything to do with AI. I left law and it suddenly was like everyone was using. I didn't even know what ChatGPT was. So I think I've got a long way to go, even understanding how it works and what it is. That's one, definitely.
How do you get over a tough meeting or moment, or in general?
Put it into perspective. I think understand why it came up. Was it tough because it triggered you in some way? Did it upset me? Was it stressful? And not hold on to it. Get it out, whether you need to rant about it to a friend, you need to journal on it, you need to voice note yourself, all of those things we've spoken about. But yeah, get it out. Don't hold on to it and let yourself feel frustrated about it and then understand why. But let the feeling come first.
You can add one thing to your bucket list now. What would it be?
I don't know if it counts as a bucket list thing, but I am desperate to go back to Martha's Vineyard, which is somewhere we went to when we were very little growing up. And it's one of those trips. I want to pair that with Utah and Nashville, and they were places that my mum really wanted to go back to. So do that for her. I think that's next on my list.
The world works in a certain way. What would you want to change about it if you could change one thing?
How negative we go to first. We always we think the worst. We think it's a surprise when something good happens. I wish that we could all see the positives before we see the negatives.
Grace, thank you so much for today. It's been such a pleasure, and we're very fortunate to have you tell your story and be so open. It's definitely very encouraging when others are open. It encourages other people to be so open, and thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a fun conversation.